Well, he actually got the realities pretty good, except you got to flip the script. It is this clash between barbarism and civilization, and but the barbarians are the Israelis, Zionism. The International Court of Justice has determined that Israel is an apartheid state. The International Criminal Court has sought arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu for being a practitioner of genocide. I mean, we're beyond speculation here. He is truly one of the most evil men that have, alive today, and probably he's in the top 10 of the most evil men of the past century. And there was a lot of evil guys in the last century. He's basically, taking, ground truth and just flipping it. It's a PR campaign. It is a regional war. There's just no doubt about it. The axis of resistance, it's not an axis of evil, it's an axis of resistance to Israel, the apartheid state, the practitioners of genocide, backed by their American allies. The axis of resistance is doing its job and doing it damn well. Taking the snot out of Israel. Israel's not winning. America's not winning. I just want to remind everybody that the Eisenhower Carrier Battle Group had to withdraw, having not completed its assigned task of breaking the Houthi blockade of Israel's southern ports. The Houthi have gotten stronger, empowered, blowing up some, in a fire and fury, light show, blowing up some, oil, containers. It didn't accomplish anything. The Houthi continued to sink ships, attack ships, enforce the blockade. And it probably triggered events. We have the Russians signing a secret military agreement with Iran. And I bet you there's a classified annex that has Russia providing Iran with some very capable anti-ship missiles and ballistic missiles, which Iran will then provide to the Houthi, keeping Putin's promise to wage asymmetrical warfare against the United States and its allies by providing weapons to forces hostile to the United States and its allies, so that they can be struck in a way that Russia's been struck by Ukraine, using weapons provided by the United States and NATO. I think that's the future of Israel. This was a pathetic speech. We'll get in. You sort of gave a hint, so I don't want to jump ahead. How pathetic this was, not just in terms of Netanyahu, but the American representatives there. This man should never have been allowed in the people's house. This man should never have been allowed in our country. This man is a disgusting warmonger. I'm not a big fan of Ms. Tlaib, but she's 100% right. He's a war criminal, and he's a practitioner of genocide. And I applaud her for having the courage to hold that sign up during this ridiculous display of submission. I mean, if you ever wanted proof positive that the United States Congress was bought and paid for by Israel, there it was. I think Dan might have some things to say on this too.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Scott. I think the thing to start with is what you started with, and that is that Netanyahu got it exactly reversed. When he talks about barbarism and versus people who care about the sanctity of life, it is the Israelis who are violating the sanctity of life in such a big way in Gaza that is heartbreaking. I'm in Egypt now. I'm with a legal team. We're going to take testimony, and we have been, of Palestinians, refugees here in Egypt. There's about 100,000 here in Egypt that have fled the war in Gaza. Many more would have, but sadly, Egypt is also a party to this war, and they're on the wrong side. And they have charged people around $5,000 to $6,000 a head to come into this country, which is shameful. And of course, no one can come in now because the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Israel has been closed by Israel since May 7th, almost 3 months. No humanitarian aid is getting in, and no human beings are getting out of that crossing, which is stunning. Gaza is now in the midst of a full-blown famine, which is human-caused, which the Israelis caused, they tried to cause. According to Lancet, I'm sure you've talked about this on the show, at least 186,000 Palestinians have died in this conflict to date. I think it's probably more than that. And you're going to see many, many more because of the starvation and disease. Right there, polio is now spreading in Gaza. They have found polio in the water system, meaning that people are contracting polio. Israel is inoculating its soldiers against it, of course, not the Palestinians. And this is all by design. They want to kill the Palestinians. That's why this is a genocide. And it's heartbreaking. And you know, my own perception and my own anecdotal evidence is that the hate that's discussed is really one way. The Israelis hate the Palestinians. Obviously, there's some Israelis who don't, and God bless them. But that number's shrinking all the time. But I don't mean Palestinians hate the Israelis, though they hate the occupation, they hate the genocide. But the hate towards the Palestinians is on a scale I've never seen that type of hatred in my life. And so again, when you talk about the first forces of darkness and light, Israel is not part of the light. The U.S. is not part of the light. And we have to start from that premise.
Yeah, and as this speech was going on, Israel was, and is, I mean, always is, every single day, killing Palestinians, hurting Palestinians in large numbers, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens per day, at least from what we know of on the so-called battlefield, which is mainly targeting civilians. But I wanted to play this another clip from Netanyahu because, Scott, you've talked a lot about the kind of realities on the ground in terms of how Israel is doing with regard to the war. I noticed that Netanyahu is very concerned about trying to paint Israel as protecting civilians. I mean, here's what he had to say about Rafah.
I have to command it. How many terrorists did you take out in Rafah? He gave me an exact number, 1,203. I asked him, how many civilians were killed? He said, Prime Minister, practically none, with the exception of a single incident where shrapnel from a bomb hit a Hamas weapons depot and unintentionally killed 24 people. The answer is practically none. You want to know why? Because Israel got the civilians out of harm's way, something people said we could never do. Well,
so I noticed in this speech, he talked a lot about things like this, about how Israel is actually doing good in Gaza, protecting civilians. But also there's this reality that, as most people know in the world, that Israel is just absolutely massacring civilians. It's also not achieving its objectives on the so-called battlefield. Scott, could you speak to this dichotomy here? Because I feel like there was some desperation at times in this speech with regard to public relations.
Well, first of all, you have to understand this entire trip to the United States is an act of desperation on the part of Benjamin Netanyahu. His political world is collapsing around his ears inside Israel. He's not very popular, to say the least. He is running. He's in one of these damned if you do, damned if you don't situations where the only way he remains viable as a prime minister is to be a wartime leader. But he's lost the war. Lost, not losing. Lost the war. He's lost the war in Gaza, and he can't fight the war against Hezbollah because the IDF is saying, we don't have any tanks. We're out of spare parts. We're out of ammunition. Our men are exhausted. We aren't designed to fight, an 8-9 month sustained conflict. That's not how our force structure works. If we go to war against Hezbollah, they'll kick the living dog poop out of us. They just flew a drone over, one of our most secret air bases. proving that A, we can't shoot them down, B, they know where the targets are, and C, if they have the weapons to hit them, they're going to hit them. Boss, we can't go against Hezbollah, which means if you can't expand the war against Hezbollah and you can't win the war in Gaza, you're not doing too well as a wartime leader. So he came to the United States to wrap the American flag around him. This is what he bought the U.S. Congress for, and it is bought and paid for by Israel. I know people say, oh, it's an American lobby. No, it's Israel. There's no difference between the pro-Israeli lobby and Israel. They're one and the same. And Israel has bragged, AIPAC has bragged about buying Congress. Every one of the primaries that they funded won because of their money. They put $24 million into one New York race to ensure that the seat went to a pro-Israeli person. And when you buy Congress, it exists to do a couple things. Keep funneling assistance, put pressure on an administration to ensure that Israel is backed up diplomatically, and then on occasion to provide song and dance shows like we saw here, where Netanyahu can be invited in. This was just a disgraceful display by the ostensible representatives of the American people, a scripted affair designed to give him standing ovations. And everybody knew when to give the ovation, because the words didn't deserve the ovation. It was like the old Soviet Politburo, time to stand up and applaud, sit down. Oh, it's time to stand up and applaud, sit down. Oh, time to stand up and applaud. And Netanyahu took advantage of it. He's just throwing out dreck, throwing out pure, unadulterated garbage. And they're applauding not because they understand what he's saying or comprehend it, but it's because they're told to applaud. This was a pure theater where Netanyahu was putting out words that through their applause, they're certifying. Now he can go back to Israel because he's going to be put under a lot of pressure to accept a ceasefire that he doesn't want. But politically, I don't think he can survive much longer unless he does that, because he can't release the pressure valve of going to war against Hezbollah. They'll lose that war. So he's going to have to accept a ceasefire and to survive that turmoil, because he will lose the far right when he does this. His coalition will collapse. He needs to be able to turn to the center and say, I am the anointed leader. The United States anointed me. I just got back from Congress. You don't have what it takes to take on me now that America's backed me. So I'm your leader. Rally around me. We'll get through this. But if you go against me, you're going against America. And not too many of his political opponents have what it takes to go against the United States. So he's creating this perception that he is the anointed one of the United States. That's what this is all about. This is just about him being able to wrap the American flag around him, go back and build a political coalition that can govern when the right abandons him, because he has no choice but to accept a ceasefire. And I think when he meets with Biden, you're going to see Biden put the old arm lock on him and say, you have no choice here. Because here's the reality. Even though Netanyahu has bought the U.S. Congress, at the end of the day, American interests will always outweigh Israeli interests at the end of the day. If Israel ever puts us in a situation where supporting Israel is detrimental to the national security of the United States, Israel's in trouble, and they've put us in that position. We are watching the world leave us. We're watching the global South abandon us at the time when Russia, China, India are coming together in Kazan in October, which isn't very far away, and they're going to create this new entity called BRICS. It already exists, but what Russia is preparing to unleash on the world doesn't understand the preparation that Russia's made in conjunction. BRICS is going to go from being a theory to reality, and it's going to expand. It's going to become a global actor, and the United States is sitting there. We can't compete, and the people that we need to compete with are jumping ship, including some big ones. India. I mean, that bear hug that Putin put on Modi, should have the United States saying, "Oh my God, we lost our Indian partner," because you did lose your Indian partner at that point in time, and they're losing everybody. Everybody's jumping ship. Turkey, NATO member, jumping ship. Everybody. And so this is the reality. And the diplomats are weighing in saying this blanket support for Israel is destroying us, ruining us. It's hurting the national security of the United States. And so Biden has no choice right now but to tell Netanyahu, you need to come on in line. You have to line up. You have to toe the line. You have to do what I tell you now. Because if you don't, it's over for you, and we're going to flush you down the toilet of life. We'll do it cleverly. We're not going to stop sending weapons and all that kind of stuff, but it'll be the end of Benjamin Netanyahu. We will ensure that he's done politically. We're in the political silly season. Up until a day ago, Biden was the Democratic nominee for this race, and so his legacy as president matters. I don't know what Kamala Harris is going to end up doing in terms of Palestine policy, et cetera. She seems to be playing somewhat of a political game right now, but we know Donald Trump is all in on Israel, so Biden has to take advantage of the time he has left to put pressure on Israel to get the United States in a position to where maybe we can stabilize this disaster that's unfolding diplomatically. And in order to do that, you have to give Netanyahu a way out. You can't insist that Netanyahu does something that is the political kiss of death. That's unreasonable. So Netanyahu's here. Congress is applauding him. He's the Middle East Winston Churchill. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Benjamin Netanyahu, God, you're the best. Go home and build your coalition because you son of a bitch, you're going to have a ceasefire or I'm flushing you down the toilet. That's the reality. Netanyahu's not a loved individual. He's a hated individual in the United States. Every one of those congressmen know what a scumbag this guy is. They know the truth about him, a corrupt individual, who was just a political survivor. But we're talking about politics right now, and I hope I don't get you banned for my language. I apologize, but that's what's happening here. We're wrapping the flag around him to give him the ability to survive the political turmoil that's going to result when he does what he has to do to keep American support, which is agree to some sort of ceasefire that is acceptable to Hamas.